He almost missed the sound because the forest was supposed to be quiet. Snow muffled everything in winter. Footsteps, wind, even distant branches breaking under weight. That was why the noise stopped him so suddenly. It was low, strained, uneven, nothing like a bird or a deer. It came again, sharper this time, followed by a heavy rustling that did not belong in a frozen forest. Chris slowed his pace. He did not call out. He did not reach for his phone. His body reacted before his thoughts caught up, the way it always did when something felt wrong. He moved off the narrow trail and stepped between the trees. The snow was deeper there, untouched, soft enough to sink into with every step. The sound grew clearer, and with it came a feeling he could not name yet. Not fear. Not curiosity. Something heavier. He stopped when he saw movement ahead. At first, his mind refused to make sense of it. A long, dark shape lay coiled at the base of a fallen tree, thick as a man's torso, its body shifting in slow, powerful waves. For a brief second, he thought it was a log that had slid downhill. Then he saw the legs. A lynx was pinned against the snow, her body twisted unnaturally. Her chest rose and fell in sharp, shallow bursts. The massive coils of a giant python were wrapped around her midsection, tightening with each breath she tried to take. Frost clung to her fur, where it had been pressed into the ground. Chris froze. His eyes moved on instinct, scanning the scene the way he had been trained to do years ago. He noticed the size of her belly almost immediately. She was pregnant. There was no doubt about it. The shape was unmistakable even beneath the thick winter coat. Another sound cut through the air, close and raw. To the left, no more than a few yards away, two other lynxes stood half-hidden among the trees. Their ears were flat, their bodies tense, paws digging into the snow. They circled slowly, stopping and starting, unsure where to strike. Every time one of them moved closer, the python's coils tightened, and the pregnant lynx let out a strangled cry. They were trying to help. They were failing. Chris felt his mouth go dry. This was not a hunt in the way nature usually arranged things. It was chaos. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong bodies colliding in a space too small for any of them. The python lifted its head slightly, sensing movement. Its body shifted, tightening again, and the lynx's back legs kicked weakly before going still. Chris took a step back without meaning to. Every instinct told him the same thing. Leave. This was not his fight. This was the wild correcting itself in its own brutal way. A single man with no weapon had no place in the middle of it. But his feet did not turn. He looked at the two lynxes again. They were not running. They were not attacking him. They were watching, eyes locked on the struggle, bodies shaking with tension. One of them made a low, broken sound that barely carried through the trees. Chris swallowed. If he walked away now, he would hear that sound for the rest of his life. He scanned the ground and spotted a fallen branch nearby, thick, solid, half buried in snow. He moved slowly toward it, careful not to slip. The lynxes noticed him then. Both turned their heads at the same time, eyes sharp, muscles coiling. Chris stopped and raised one hand, palm open. He spoke without thinking, his voice low and steady. Easy. I am not coming closer. I am not here for you. The words were useless, and he knew it, but they kept his breathing even. He bent down and wrapped his fingers around the branch. It was heavier than it looked. Wet wood, frozen at the core. Behind him, the forest remained silent. The python shifted again, its body rippling as it adjusted its grip. The pregnant lynx let out a sound that was barely more than air leaving her lungs. Snow sprayed as her claws scraped uselessly against the ground. Chris felt the moment narrowing. He could still turn back. He could drop the branch and walk away, tell himself he had done the only sensible thing. Instead, he took one careful step forward. The lynxes reacted instantly. Both moved, fast and fluid, not toward him but away from the python. They backed off several yards and stopped, eyes never leaving Chris. They did not flee. They waited. Chris understood then. This was not trust. It was desperation. He tightened his grip on the branch and shifted his weight, testing the snow beneath his boots. The python's body glistened dark against the white ground, each slow contraction stealing more breath from the lynx beneath it. Chris lifted the branch. If he walked away now, this would end in minutes. He stepped closer, heart pounding, knowing that whatever happened next would change him, whether he survived it or not. Chris did not rush forward. He stood still, branch raised but not yet swung, forcing himself to breathe slowly through his nose. The forest around them felt tighter now, as if the trees themselves were leaning in. Snow continued to fall in small, quiet flakes, landing on fur, on scales, on his jacket, indifferent to what was unfolding below. The python adjusted its coils again, slow and deliberate. Each movement was economical, practiced. The pressure around the lynx's body increased in small increments, timed to her breaths. She fought it, but her strength was fading. Her movements were shorter now, weaker, her claws leaving shallow lines in the snow. Chris shifted his stance slightly, careful not to slip. He had no illusions about what he was holding. The branch was not a weapon. It was a chance. Nothing more. The two lynxes remained where they were, flanking the scene at a distance. They paced in half circles, stopping, listening, recalculating. One crouched low, tail twitching, clearly ready to spring. Each time she leaned forward, the python reacted, tightening its grip just enough to force the pregnant lynx into another ragged breath. They understood the risk. Chris watched them closely. Their eyes flicked between him and the snake, not with confusion but with calculation. They were reading him the same way he was reading them. There was no panic in their movements, only restraint. A sudden snap echoed through the trees. Chris flinched before realizing it was only a branch breaking under the weight of snow somewhere behind him. Still, the sound was enough to draw attention. One of the lynxes turned fully toward him then, stepping out from the cover of the trees. She did not hiss. She did not bare her teeth. She took one careful step forward. Chris felt his heart spike. He held his ground, keeping the branch lifted but angled away from her. He lowered his shoulders slightly, making himself smaller without crouching. He spoke again, his voice barely louder than the falling snow. "I am not taking her." The words sounded thin even to his own ears. He doubted the lynx understood them. What mattered was the tone, the stillness, the fact that he was not advancing. The lynx paused. Her ears rotated, tracking every sound. Her gaze flicked to the python, then back to Chris. She took another step, closing the distance just enough for him to see the frost clinging to her whiskers. Chris did not move. Behind them, the pregnant lynx let out another strained sound, shorter this time. The python's body tightened visibly, its muscles rolling beneath dark scales. It was not rushing. It did not need to. Chris felt something settle in his chest. This was the moment where watching ended. He shifted his grip on the branch, sliding one hand closer to the thicker end. His gloves squeaked faintly against wet bark. He tested the weight again, lifting and lowering it just an inch, feeling how it pulled at his shoulders. The lynx in front of him stopped advancing. She did not retreat. She stood there, balanced and still, eyes fixed on him. Her body language changed, subtle but unmistakable. The tension was no longer aimed at him. It was aimed at what he was about to do. Chris took a slow step to the side, angling his approach toward the python's outer coils rather than the lynx beneath it. The movement was cautious, deliberate. He did not want to startle the snake into tightening further. The lynxes tracked his movement. Neither attacked. Neither fled. They adjusted their positions slightly, spreading out, creating space. Chris understood the risk now in a way that had nothing to do with fear. If he struck too early, the python could react faster than he could move. If he waited too long, there would be nothing left to save. He raised the branch higher, muscles burning from the tension of holding it ready. Snow crunched softly under his boots as he took another step. The lynx closest to him made a low sound, not a warning, not a threat. It was brief, controlled. Chris locked his eyes on the python's body. There was no turning back anymore. Chris moved. Not fast. Not suddenly. He shortened the distance one careful step at a time, feeling the resistance of the snow under his boots. Each movement was deliberate, measured against the rhythm of the python's body. He watched the coils expand and contract, memorizing the pattern, waiting for a fraction of a pause. The lynxes reacted immediately. Both backed away from the snake, retreating several yards before stopping at the same time. They did not run. They planted themselves in the snow, shoulders low, eyes fixed on the python and then on Chris. Their bodies were tense but still, like drawn bows held at full stretch. Chris felt exposed. The branch was raised now, gripped tight enough that his hands ached. He shifted his stance again, widening it slightly to keep his balance. The cold no longer registered. Neither did the burn in his arms. His focus narrowed until there was nothing else but the dark body in front of him and the lynx pinned beneath it. He took another step. The python sensed the change. Its head lifted higher this time, turning toward him in a slow, controlled motion. Its tongue flicked once, twice, tasting the air. The coils tightened again, and the pregnant lynx's body jerked in response. Chris did not wait any longer. He brought the branch down hard against the outer coil. The impact landed with a dull, heavy sound. Wet wood against dense muscle. The python reacted instantly, its body rippling as it tightened instead of loosening. The lynx beneath it let out a sharp, broken cry. Chris struck again. This time he aimed lower, hitting the same section of the body, pouring his weight into the blow. The branch bounced, jarring his arms up to the shoulders. Pain flared, sharp and immediate, but he barely noticed it. The lynxes surged forward a step, then stopped. Chris adjusted his grip and struck a third time. The python twisted, coils shifting violently now, no longer smooth and controlled. Snow sprayed as its body thrashed, trying to reorient toward the new threat. Chris stumbled back half a step, boots sliding, barely keeping his footing. He raised the branch again. This was the moment that terrified him the most. Not the strength of the snake, not the proximity of the lynxes, but the realization that nothing he was doing guaranteed the right outcome. Each strike could make it worse. Each second wasted could be fatal. He struck again. The branch connected near the base of the coils, closer to where the lynx's body was pinned. The python reacted differently this time. Its grip faltered for a brief instant, pressure easing just enough for the lynx beneath it to drag in a deeper breath. Chris did not hesitate. He stepped closer and brought the branch down again, harder, faster now, abandoning restraint. His breathing turned ragged. Snow crunched under his boots as he repositioned, refusing to let the snake recover its rhythm. The lynxes began to circle. They moved wider now, faster, their steps light and precise. They did not attack. They waited for an opening, watching the python's movements shift from control to agitation. Chris swung again. The python's head snapped toward him. Everything compressed into that instant. Distance, risk, consequence. Chris felt his muscles lock, his grip tighten instinctively. The python surged. Its body recoiled sharply, coils sliding over one another as it abandoned its slow constriction and redirected its mass. The movement was sudden, explosive, nothing like the controlled pressure from before. Chris barely had time to react. The lynx beneath the coils twisted free by inches, enough to pull one leg out from under the snake. The python changed its focus. And that was when Chris understood that the next move would decide everything. The surge came faster than Chris expected. The python's body snapped toward him in a violent recoil, abandoning its slow constriction for raw momentum. Coils slid over each other, heavy and wet, throwing snow into the air. Chris reacted on instinct, stepping back hard, boots skidding as he barely kept his balance. He swung again. The branch connected near the upper coils, just as the snake twisted. The impact landed off-center, jarring his arms and sending a sharp shock through his shoulders. The python recoiled, not retreating, but breaking its rhythm. That was enough. The pressure around the lynx loosened. It happened in fragments. A leg pulled free. Then, another. The pregnant lynx twisted with a strength Chris had not seen before, dragging herself out of the collapsing coils. She stumbled, rolled once in the snow, and scrambled several feet away. Chris shouted without meaning to. Back. The word tore out of him, raw and uncontrolled. He did not know who he was shouting at. The snake. The lynxes. Himself. The python thrashed, confused now, its body no longer anchored. It turned sharply, head swinging between Chris and the retreating lynx, recalculating. Chris did not give it time. He raised the branch and struck again. The blow landed harder this time, driven by desperation rather than precision. The snake recoiled, sliding backward across the snow, its coils unraveling enough to break contact entirely. Chris retreated. He did not turn his back. He stepped away slowly, branch held high, eyes locked on the python's head. Every muscle in his body screamed to run, but he forced himself to stay controlled. The lynxes moved. They did not charge the snake. They did not approach Chris. They flowed around the injured female, forming a loose barrier with their bodies. One positioned herself between the python and the pregnant lynx. The other stayed closer to the trees, watching Chris and the snake at the same time. It was not aggression. It was protection. The python hesitated. Its body shifted, tension rippling along its length. It was wounded, disrupted, but far from helpless. Chris could feel that danger still hung thick in the air. He took another step back. Snow crunched loudly beneath his boots. The sound echoed in the sudden stillness, too sharp, too human. The lynxes flicked their ears but did not move from their positions. The pregnant lynx staggered. She tried to stand, her legs trembling beneath her weight. For a moment it looked like she would steady herself. Then her strength gave out. She collapsed onto the snow. Her body hit the ground heavily, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. She lay still, sides barely moving, eyes half-lidded. Chris felt his chest tighten. He froze where he stood, branch still raised, unsure whether to move closer or retreat further. Every instinct screamed that something had gone terribly wrong. The lynxes reacted instantly. One pressed close to the fallen female, lowering her head, nudging her shoulder gently. The other turned fully toward Chris, posture low, ears forward, eyes sharp. She did not advance. She warned. Chris lowered the branch slowly, keeping his movements visible. Easy. I am backing away. His voice was hoarse now, stripped of control. He took another step back, then another, increasing the distance between himself and the group. Behind him, the python slid farther away, retreating toward the fallen tree, its body dragging a dark, uneven path through the snow. The forest held its breath. Chris stopped when he reached the edge of the clearing. He did not leave yet. He could not. The pregnant lynx remained motionless on the ground. And in that stillness, the seconds stretched long enough to feel like an ending. The forest did not rush back to life. After the violence, the silence felt heavier than the noise that had come before. Snow continued to fall, thin and steady, settling over tracks, over torn bark, over the dark marks left by the struggle. Chris stood where he was, far enough to matter, close enough to see. The python was gone. Its body had slid away into the trees without ceremony, leaving behind only a wide, uneven trail pressed into the snow. Chris did not follow it with his eyes for long. What mattered now was not what had fled, but what remained. The pregnant lynx lay on her side, chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven motions. Steam lifted faintly from her fur where the cold met her breath. The two other lynxes stayed close, one pressed against her back, the other positioned at her front, watching the forest beyond. They had not looked at Chris again. He lowered the branch fully and let it fall into the snow at his feet. His arms trembled as the tension drained from them, leaving behind a dull ache that reached deep into his shoulders. He did not step forward. He knew better. Minutes passed. Maybe more. Time stretched in a way that made counting meaningless. The lynx on the ground shifted suddenly, her body tensing. A low sound escaped her throat, barely audible, nothing like the cries from before. Chris felt his breath catch. The lynxes reacted immediately. One lowered her head toward the fallen female, ears flicking, body close. The other widened her stance slightly, alert but still calm. The pregnant lynx strained. Her movements were small, controlled, driven by instinct rather than strength. She dug her claws into the snow, pulling herself into a position that looked painful and deliberate. Another low sound followed, longer this time. Chris stayed still. He did not crouch. He did not move closer. He kept his hands visible, resting loosely at his sides, his body angled away. Whatever was happening now did not involve him. The first cub arrived without drama. A small, dark shape slid onto the snow between the lynx's hind legs, wet and motionless. The mother turned her head slowly, exhaustion written into every movement. She nudged the cub with her nose, once, then again. Nothing happened. Chris felt a tight pull in his chest, sharp and immediate. He swallowed, forcing himself to keep breathing. This was not his place. This was not his call. The mother lynx licked the cub, rough and quick, her movements growing more urgent. The second lynx leaned closer, watching intently, body rigid. The cub remained still. Chris shifted his weight almost without realizing it, a reflex born of helplessness. He stopped himself before the movement became a step. Then the cub twitched. Just once. A weak, almost imperceptible movement ran through its small body. The mother froze, then licked faster, more deliberately. Another twitch followed, then a thin, broken sound that barely carried. Chris closed his eyes for a second. The relief came quietly, without triumph. The mother lynx pulled the cub closer to her chest, curling her body protectively around it. Her breathing steadied slightly, though exhaustion still weighed heavy on her frame. Moments later, she strained again. The second cub arrived faster than the first, sliding free and landing against the snow. This one moved almost immediately, limbs jerking weakly as it drew its first breaths. The lynxes shifted positions, adjusting their circle, creating space for the mother to work. Their movements were precise, practiced, free of panic. Chris watched from the edge of the clearing, a silent witness. There was no moment of victory. No signal that his choice had been right. Only the quiet continuation of life where moments earlier there had been none. He took a slow step back. Then, another. The lynxes did not react. Their world had narrowed to the small bodies pressed against the snow and the mother who guarded them. Chris turned away at last, careful not to make noise. He walked back the way he had come, leaving the clearing untouched behind him. He did not look back. He already knew his role in this story was over. Chris slept badly that night. Not because of dreams. Because every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same flashes of movement in the snow. The thick coil tightening. The sound the pregnant lynx had made when she could not draw air. The instant the python's head snapped toward him. He told himself he had done what anyone would do. He did not believe it. In the morning, the world looked ordinary again. The sky was pale. The air was sharp and clean. Snow lay on the ground as if nothing had happened. That normality felt wrong. Chris kept busy on purpose. He checked the fence line behind his cabin. He carried firewood. He fixed a loose hinge on the shed door. Small tasks with clear endings, the kind that let his hands work while his mind tried to settle. But it did not settle. The image of the cub lying still on the snow stayed with him. The way the mother had worked without hesitation, licking and nudging, refusing to accept an ending. He kept thinking about how close he had come to making it worse. He also kept thinking about the two lynxes. They had been there the whole time. Not as pets. Not as symbols. As animals making hard choices in seconds. They had backed away when he stepped in. They had held their ground when he stepped out. They had not attacked him. That part did not fit neatly in his head. 2 days passed. On the third morning, Chris found himself standing by the door with his boots on. He had not planned it. He had not decided it the night before. He just did it, as if his body had already made the choice. He packed lightly. Water. A small first aid kit he never used but always carried. A flashlight. No food. No rope. No weapon. He brought a walking stick this time, not a branch. Something he could lean on in the snow, something that looked like what it was. The forest greeted him the same way it always did, quiet and indifferent. His old tracks from the day of the attack were gone, softened by fresh snowfall. He followed landmarks instead. A split pine. A boulder shaped like a crouched animal. The shallow dip where the wind always collected snow. His pulse rose as he neared the clearing. He slowed down before stepping into it, listening first. No cries. No thrashing. No sudden movement. He stepped forward. The clearing looked different. Snow had filled in most of the disturbance, smoothing the ground, covering the worst of the marks. But there were still signs if you knew where to look. A dark smear where the python's body had dragged. A patch of snow packed hard by the mother lynx's shifting weight. Chris stopped at the edge. He did not go farther. He did not call out. He simply stood, hands visible, breathing slow. At first, he saw nothing. Then a shape moved between the trees. One of the lynxes stepped into view, the same one that had approached him before. Frost clung to her whiskers again, catching the light. She did not lower her body. She did not retreat. She watched him, still and alert. Chris stayed where he was. A second shape appeared behind her. The mother. She moved slowly, favoring one side, but she was standing. Her belly was smaller now. Her fur was clumped in places, matted from blood and snow, but her eyes were clear. Chris exhaled without meaning to. He did not step closer. The mother lynx stopped and looked at him. Not like prey looks at a predator. Not like an animal trapped. Like a wild thing measuring distance. Then she turned slightly, just enough for him to see what she carried. Two small bodies pressed against her chest, tucked into the shelter of her fur. The cubs were tiny, dark and unsteady. One lifted its head briefly, then tucked it back down. The other squirmed weakly, searching for warmth. Chris felt his throat tighten. The lynxes did not move toward him. They did not run. They held their line. Chris nodded once, a small motion that meant nothing and everything. He took a slow step back, then another, keeping his eyes low, not challenging, not begging. The mother lynx did not follow. The other lynx remained between them, watching Chris until the distance widened. Chris backed out of the clearing the same way he had entered. Only when the trees broke the line of sight did he turn and walk. He left no offering. He left no mark. He carried nothing with him except the knowledge that life had continued without his permission. And that was the only ending worth having. A week went by before Chris returned again. He did not tell himself it was for any noble reason. He did not pretend he was checking on them as if he had a claim. It was simpler than that. The forest had handed him something he could not put down, and his mind kept reaching for it in quiet moments. The weather shifted in small ways. The wind grew sharper. The snow crusted harder at night. Branches sagged under new weight and then snapped back when the sun softened them in the afternoon. Life moved. Chris moved with it, doing what he always did. He chopped wood, kept the stove fed, carried water, repaired what winter broke. He spoke to no one about what had happened. Not because it was a secret, but because he could not explain it without making it smaller. When he finally set out again, he walked slower. He took the same route, not because he expected to see them, but because the place had become a marker in his head. The split pine. The crouched boulder. The shallow dip where wind packed snow into a smooth curve. As he neared the clearing, he stopped and listened. The forest gave him nothing. No cries. No movement. No warning. He stepped into the clearing. It was empty. The disturbance from the fight was almost completely erased now, covered by clean snow that looked untouched. The dark drag mark from the python had faded, softened into a faint bruise in the white. The packed patch where the mother had labored was gone beneath a fresh layer. Chris stood at the edge for a long moment, letting the stillness settle. Then he saw the tracks. They were not obvious. They never were. Lynx prints did not gouge the snow the way heavier animals did. They appeared as delicate depressions, spaced in a pattern that spoke of quiet control. There were 3 sets. One larger set, uneven in places as if the animal had favored one leg. 2 smaller sets, close together, weaving slightly as if the bodies that made them were still learning balance. Chris crouched slowly and traced the line with his eyes. The tracks led away from the clearing and into the trees, heading toward deeper country, away from trails, away from any place a person would walk by accident. He did not follow. That was the first thing he understood clearly. If he followed, even just to see, he would be stepping into a space that was not his. He would be turning their survival into his story again. The forest did not give him a right to that. Chris straightened and looked into the trees where the tracks disappeared. He felt the urge to do something. Leave food. Leave a blanket. Leave a sign that he had been here. He let the urge pass. The mother had not asked for help in a way humans asked. She had fought. The other lynxes had waited. The cubs had breathed and moved and been carried forward. None of it required him now. Chris stood there longer than he needed to, breathing in the cold air until it burned his lungs. He listened to the faintest sounds, the soft creak of wood, the whisper of wind passing through needles. He thought about the moment he had raised the branch. He had not been brave. He had been afraid and stubborn and unwilling to walk away from a helpless sound. He thought about how easily that moment could have ended differently. One wrong strike. One slip. One coil tightening at the wrong second. The forest would have carried on, indifferent, and he would have become another quiet disappearance between trees. Chris looked down at the tracks again. They were already fading at the edges as snow dusted over them. The world did not preserve proof of what had happened. It did not keep trophies. It did not carve monuments. It just moved on. Chris took a slow step backward. Then, another. He left the clearing without turning his head. He did not rush. He did not linger. He did not try to hold onto the last line of sight. When he reached the trees, he stopped briefly and placed a hand against the rough bark of a pine, feeling the cold through his glove. He did not say anything. There was nothing to say. He walked home with the quiet weight of the week inside him, not as a burden, but as a reminder. Some things you help and then you let go. Some endings are not meant to be watched. And the right choice, sometimes, is to leave the forest to the ones who belong to it.
Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories. And now just click the playlist or the next video on your screen.